Ready? How's that? Very good. I see that it is 10:01. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Notice that the meeting was properly posted on June 29th, 2023. Let's do a roll call.
Brandy Martins for District 2.
Dawn Cash, District 3.
D1 present.
Next up, we have the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I wasn't here. I'm going to abstain.
I was going to abstain as well.
We can just do
Well, let's defer the minutes to the next meeting then.
Sorry.
All in favor of a deferral, say aye.
Aye.
Good morning.
I'll get with Cody. He's out.
Great. Item number 2 is discussion on possible action regarding VOCC Employees of the Month. Karen? Good morning. How are you?
Motion to receive.
Second?
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
IKK. Thank you.
It's the day after the 4th of July, so apparently we only have one option
That's
today.
exactly what I was about to say.
We're going to keep it simple.
Perfect. I make a motion to approve option A.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay. Agenda item 3, discussion of possible action regarding transfer of the SHINE program. Grant?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't have anything to add for today unless everybody's prepared to take a look at the policy.
The policies and
So-
procedures?
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
Yep, I don't have anything additional other than that.
Okay.
We are prepared to go over the policies and procedures.
And Joe, you had asked that we delay this discussion a couple of weeks ago. Are you ready now?
Yeah, Grant gave me a document that I think has input from all of us or all the offices. So if we want line by line or page by page.
And
whatever.
Grant, the most recent document, we just glance at mine, and this is the color, the multicolor is the most recent.
Updated
documents
on
from a couple of weeks
5/18.
ago. Okay, very good. Grant, do you want to walk us through this, if you don't mind, a little bit, please?
I can. for the most part, like I mentioned before, each person who gave input as to what should be in this policy is I put into one. And so that's from each of the districts as well as the district attorney's office on what should be in this document. And so it's not the cleanest looking thing, but I made it as clean as I possibly could by color coordinating each person and what they chose to input. And so with that, it's up to you how you want to tackle this.
And my first question is the DA has approved this in this form, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Has approved?
This document?
No.
Okay.
No, what you see in green, that was the suggested language from that office.
But, and have they received a copy of this? Okay. Good to know.
Well, shall we tackle it just one number at a time, starting with number one, purpose?
Works for me.
And I holistically had one other question. Did you, forgive me for not recalling the sequencing, but did you provide us with this document? Charles also brought, during the course of these discussions, a list of example activities. Did that come after we got,
Yes. Yes, I delivered this by email. It's
after
probably
that?
been
That's my
3
other
weeks
question,
ago
too.
or
Okay.
so, and I think Charles is here somewhere. I think that was maybe 2 weeks ago. I think it was a list of the special events that
And I was just wondering, and I may have asked that at that time, had the district attorney's office had a chance to look at those?
I'm sorry, would you repeat?
Had the DA's office had a chance to look at those documents or that list you provided us?
I don't know. Did you submit them to the? Oh, you didn't? Okay. No, I don't know. I just know that the last time I was up here speaking, Cody made a statement that he, I think, doubted the legality of working with the not-for-profits in the community. And so I know we got several guests here today that I think have really good background information on that, Bob Rabbits and things like that. So I think that would be the first thing to address today, if that's a legal entities for Shine to be working with. So I think that's a great place to start. Yeah, and I think that's the larger question, not those specifically ones that we listed, but just whether it's legal for Shine to move forward as they have for 13 years, or working with community service and not-for-profits.
Okay, I was just trying to kind of get us to a holistic, looking at everything at once and making sure everyone had seen all the same documents. I wasn't trying to divert you from starting and going through Grant. I think it is a good place to start for you to go ahead and present to us this document.
And I did submit that document to the Horseshoe
Yes,
at that
yes,
meeting.
I recall.
Okay.
Is there a will of the body as to how we proceed?
I'm fine with just going, section by section. As far as the nonprofits that you were referring to, that is addressed in the third section, background. Perhaps once we get to that point, we can have more of an extensive conversation related to that.
Good, that sounds good. Okay. Renee?
I have a question. This document wasn't attached to the agenda. Are there copies of it so that those of us that are here of interest in this discussion can see?
I do have an extra copy, but I only have one. You are more than welcome to.
Is there a copy machine on this floor that I could take and make? I've got a number of judges and other folks here that are interested in this discussion.
I bet there is.
And I do believe we moved to receive this document several weeks ago, so I understand. I
Yes,
understand your
you
point.
did, and it wasn't attached to the agenda, so that's, yeah.
I understand
Thank
your
you.
point. How many copies would you like?
Why don't we just,
You want to move to the next one?
why don't we just let the board hash this out? I'm feeling the pressure to move forward today.
What was your suggestion, to let the BOCC,
Let the BOCC deal with this.
as far as establishing the policies and procedures, this entire document?
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed this quite a bit. We have a document that wasn't linked to the agenda. We have judges and others that may be interested in seeing it. We have a couple of options. We can go line by line, we can get them copies. We last time asked that the Court Services Advisory Board weigh in. I don't know that they've done so at this time. That's made up of several of the people that are interested in seeing what this document entails. You had asked some questions about how the DA's even seen this. I'm not in a position today that I'm ready to make a decision on recommending this one way or the other. If it's the desire of this group, then move it up to the BOCC and let them decide whether they want to move forward. But I would anticipate that some of the same questions we might have, as the DA seen it, what about the judges and others, would be asked at that meeting as well. So
is it your motion to advance this to the BOCC as is?
I'm not, no, I'm just saying if we're not going to give them an opportunity to look at it, we're not going to ask Court Services to look at it like we had previously done, the advisory board. They're a recommending body as well to the BOCC, made up of lawyers and judges and others, then put it to the BOCC. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Might I suggest, only in efforts of thinking, you know, this is a board that deals with policy and governance. We are talking about policies of a county department. What if, since we have the resources, they're making copies, we have people present, what if we were to proceed with going line by line, taking all of the input that we have district attorney's input, we have court services input, we have other departments input on this, just go through, kind of loosely come up with some sort of a document, and then proceed with taking that to either BOCC or the Community Services Board or a final copy for DA's approval, that sort of thing. At least at this point, we could get the bones together, you know, hash out the conversations that we've already had that are documented on this version here, and just see what we can come up with.
That's y'all's will. All right, let's go.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you have met with the community services. I'm going to botch the name of that committee.
We did 3 months ago, 2 months ago. 2 months ago, advisory board was separate to do the presentation and have
On
some
this
discussion.
document.
Not on that.
Not related to policies and
that-
procedures.
The document in question we're looking at, it's not in no way, shape, or form something that could be presented for a final draft. It is merely the meetings that we've had and the
Mhm.
discussion, and everybody advised or requested that I just add everything to a document of all the different suggestions. And I have suggestions from multiple people to put into one document for the whole to look at, to see what to keep in, take out, just the process of creating a policy. If you want me to scratch all that and just create one that I think is best, I can do that too. But just following the direction, I put together one large document that has everybody's suggestion, one
Well,
for
and I
everybody to
think-
see at one time.
I think that's ultimately helpful. I mean, because you see the color coding, you know, and it's all broken out into the respective sections. I think what you put together is very helpful. It gives several perspectives and really kind of lays it out for us. And I feel like as policy and governance, it is incumbent upon us to, you know, do the heavy lifting and really try to do what we can to put something together that could be viable to present for a possible final draft. That's just my opinion, though.
My preference is simply to not delay, that we go ahead if we need to if we need to go line by line, let's just go ahead and do it. And then once we get to what we think is quickly a final document, then it will be my preference to make sure that the district attorney's office has blessed that before
Absolutely.
the SEC has a
Sure.
chance to vote.
Right.
But otherwise, I'm interested in let's go ahead and discussing it. I haven't been paying attention to whether or not we have the copies that we need yet, or if we, okay. So what we might do is just defer this item for the next few minutes and move on to other things and then come back to this grant once we have the documents disseminated throughout the room. Be my current. I'll move that we delay 3.
Can we just skip over it and come back
Yeah,
without
whatever.
delaying? Perfect.
Let's move to number 4. Discussion and possible action regarding ARPA project 10091. Danielle, can you hear us?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Great. So this item is a return of funds back to the ARPA 1415 account. So the Juvenile Bureau has their telemental health program contracted for, and services are being provided. Due to Hannah's great work, they were able to contract under what had been set aside. So there's $2,522.80 that can be returned to the ARPA 1415 account.
Perfect.
Very good. Do I have a
Great job,
motion?
Hannah. All right, I make a motion to return the total of $2,522.80 returned to ARPA Fund 1415.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item number 5, discussion and possible action regarding policies, processes, procedures regarding administration of the ARPA funding allocation. Danielle?
Yes, all right. So I emailed over the project status template with updates yesterday. We'll go over just a couple of those since not everybody sees this, but just a couple of items I know that are of continual interest. So the interviews have started for the following projects: the Juvenile Bureau's elevators, the facilities projects for courthouse elevators, and then the facilities projects for annex elevators. So each of those interviews have begun, and the owner's rep and I believe the purchasing department, along with facilities, is working diligently to get those projects moving. A couple of projects that we have kind of called out as projects that are kind of stalled, and we have shared each of these with you previously. One of them being the detention center roof replacement, the detention center ceiling of the metal roof, and then the loading dock updates as well. It's our understanding that the county facilities department and engineering department wanted to do their own assessment of needs for those projects. So we are still waiting on that assessment of need, but either way, since those need to be new contracts as we've previously discussed, it's not a particular issue at this time, but just something to be aware of and something we have mentioned previously. I'm going to skip over the 4th floor remodel at the moment, since I know there's a couple of agenda items for that, so we can talk a little more in depth about that moving forward with those items. The next couple of things just to note is that we have received proof of payments from the detention center. And so each of those have gone into their compliance files, and that makes those projects pretty much ready to close out. We're doing some small validation of the expenditures, but are ready to start closing those out as well. And then something exciting to note, as you all know, on Monday, the community applicants were approved by BOCC, and we will host our first training for them on the 25th. We are in town, so we will do 2 compliance trainings, one at 4 p.m. and one at 6 p.m. in person on the 25th. And then for people who can't make those in-person meetings, we will also do a virtual one on the 27th through Teams. We are going to follow up with each of the applicants, letting them know kind of where we're going to do the training, since it hasn't been fully determined yet. We're thinking maybe in the county annex facility or at one of the local libraries, and we will be sure to email them that information with the locations, dates and times, and then of course the Teams link as well. So those are really exciting. And that kind of wraps us through a high level overview of project status. But if anyone has questions about any of the particular projects, I'm happy to discuss them at this time.
Do you know, Danielle, so the training will be July 25th? Is that what you said?
Yes, the first training will be July 25th, and then the virtual training will be July 27th.
And do they have to participate in that prior to any funding moving
Yes,
forward?
they do. And that was in the email we shared with them on Monday when they received notification that they were awarded funding. We did note that they will need to attend one of the 3 sessions. They don't need to attend all of them, just one of the 3. And if they can't, for whatever reason, make one of those times work, to please let us know and we could work with them.
Perfect. That's very
Good.
exciting.
Any other questions?
Absolutely.
Do you need any action from us other than to accept your report on this item, Danielle?
Nope, that's it. Just
So-
accept it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to item number 6, discussion of possible action regarding allocation of existing ARPA dollars for the build out of the ICB.
Yes. So I also shared this memo with your offices each individually regarding the remodel plans moving forward. I know there has been a lot of change in what was originally considered the 4th floor remodel. Based on current county direction, it is looking like, based off of our understanding, that the court clerk's office is intending to move to the 5th floor and do a build out of the 5th floor for social distancing purposes. And then the DA's office will transition out of the annex and courthouse and into the ICB building for build out and social distancing purposes. The memo that we provided kind of just outlined the history of how the project was originally authorized and why it needs to be reauthorized at this point, just because it's kind of taken on a new shape and it's on a different floor and things like that. But the integrity of the projects remain the same. They're under the social distancing portion of eligibility when it comes to capital expenditures. But if there are specific questions about that, I'm happy to dive in. But generally speaking, this is still considered a likely eligible project. Just important to note, no capital projects are outright eligible due to the way that final rule is written. So we just will include the written justification and supporting documents, including pictures, which Keith has already sent some over into the compliance file so that auditors are able to kind of see the need and the improvements. But that is just, in general, no capital expenditures are outright eligible. But with the supporting documents included should be a likely eligible expense. And the items on this agenda allow you, I believe, to move forward with new direction of the project, saying that it would be the 5th floor court clerk build out and then the DA's office in the ICB.
Thank you. I have some questions. Do you all have questions? And I want to note that we're sort of blending actually agenda items 6 and 7 a little bit here. I thank you for the memo. That was helpful. I noticed, this isn't a negative, but it did catch my attention that as you did the breakdowns and the COVID analysis on almost each project under the heading of will prevent or mitigate COVID, the answer is no. So I assume that they, and I'm sure it's in here, but this dominoes into ARPA spending through a different part of the final rule.
So at the individual expenditure level, something like electrical or plumbing is not necessarily mitigating the spread of COVID, right? But in a project sense of a whole, the project itself is a COVID mitigation. So the individual pieces, correct, we are not tracking that as necessarily preventing COVID. But you have to have these pieces in order to build out the facilities and create the space that's needed for individuals to work safely. And therefore, at the overarching level, the entirety of the project is for COVID mitigation. But the individual kind of line items don't necessarily align to that. but not particularly a problem. It's just a reality of the way that construction projects are. But once everything is built out, when it comes together, it is a mitigation.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So once the projects are complete, you all will be able to document COVID mitigation in a way that is successful under the final rule.
Right. We'll be able to denote the increased square footage. Also, just we could use a percentage as well. You know, they went from having 25% of space to 30% or anything like that. We will track key performance indicators of that nature, and saying, I think my numbers are rough because I'm guesstimating, but I think right now the DA's office is about 2,500 square feet, and they'll be increasing to 3,200 ish. So we can easily note that increases in space for social distancing purposes.
And thank you for the dates on this. Very helpful for me to sort of see that history. Yes,
Mhm.
I was not
Mhm.
here for part of that.
Yeah, this is great,
Right.
Danielle. Thank you.
Is there any part of that history that at one time had been contemplated as eligible and is no longer eligible as we shift things around?
Well, the biggest thing that you know, as this project has taken on multiple forms, and we're comfortable with the one that it is currently in, and the reason that we are having it approved is two separate projects at this point rather than one project, is for the appearance of it not looking like a domino effect, because it's not. The DA's office moving to ICP is its own project. That's its own entity. It provides its own space for them and their working capabilities. And then the court clerk moving to the 5th floor is its own independent project as well. The two of them are not relying on one another. And that is something that had previously kind of been in conversations as we discussed 3rd floors, 5th floors, 4th floors. That was kind of creating what we were considering a domino effect. And in the domino effect, a lot of that is not eligible because you're having to make those changes based off of the original need to move or want to move. And that then creating a ripple just isn't a strong justification. But because of the way that it is currently structured and the fact that these are two independent projects that both independently serve social distancing needs, there's no concern with that eligibility. Whereas previously the domino effect was a little bit of a concern. So it's actually better the way that it is currently structured than the way it was previously discussed.
That's good to know. So I also wanted to ask the converse, did anything become ARPA eligible that we had discussed not being eligible before?
Sorry, I don't think I caught that.
I initially asked, did anything, any of these proposals no longer seem eligible? Did anything become eligible? Just no change in that.
There's no change. The items that were eligible previously are still eligible, and anything that was previously ineligible remains ineligible. There's no changes regarding those justifications. So, you know, the remodel cost and the build out and the asbestos also remains within the original approval. So the logic hasn't changed at all.
And have you all been, I know everyone has this on their mind. I think I said this last week. I hope we're all watching to see that we don't delay in discussing what to do, delay ourselves in such a way that we time out, if you will. I know we have a deadline to spend, and I'm assuming that we're all planning this, that the timing will still work. Is that correct?
Right. As long as we are able to get this moving soon, it will be fine. We have been working with Charles, Keith, and Stacey with infrastructure to ensure that we understood the project moving forward and that they understood our kind of, you know, view of the eligibility of it. And at this time, there's not a significant concern in project deadlines, but if we get too far out of probably the end of this month, we will start having some of those concerns on capability of really getting things contracted by the 2024 deadline and then built out by 2026. I don't know that Keith nor Stacey is there today, but they can probably speak to timeline a little bit better than I can.
Yes,
we have
Keith
been
and
in
Stacy
the
were both
works.
here. Keith, did you want to make a comment related to timeline?
I have a question or two before maybe we get there.
Mhm.
Danielle?
Mhm.
In your memorandum on the last page, the next steps section.
Mhm.
We've talked a lot about these projects are likely eligible. But
Right.
there's what I would consider a cautionary tale or note in the last paragraph. Generally, the proposed fifth floor and ICB remodels are likely eligible due to the associated COVID mitigation. However, being a capital expense, the project is not outright eligible, which requires the support of a strong written justification. Do we have those in place yet?
So we're able to take a lot of what I put in the memo and build it out into the written justification. The written justification does have a outline right now and a general framework, but because there were ongoing conversations of which floors would be getting remodeled versus not remodeled, who was going to move versus not move, the details are not within that document yet, just because it hadn't been formally finalized. But we can pull those together very quickly, yes.
So in some of our projects, we've not released funds because we don't have the written justification yet. I think behavioral health is one. There might be the same is true of Griffin. Is it not wise on our part to have all of that ready to go? And if we can do it quickly so that we have that comfort level you're talking about?
Sure, we can get that pulled together. Maybe by the end of this week, probably pushing it, but definitely by next week, as long as the P&G committee gives us direction on authorizing that we are correct and that it will be the court clerk moving to the fifth floor and that it will be the DA's office moving to ICB. We just want to make sure we have the appropriate direction to move forward with what we add into that written justification.
Okay, and then one last question from me. Splitting this into two projects, we're still staying within the framework set or the dollars approved previously, correct?
Yes, that's correct. The dollar amount, that 9.8 figure, is going to be used for both projects. They will be two separate projects, but there is no additional funding being allocated at this time. Any improvements for either project will need to come out of the 9.8 total. And the infrastructure committee is aware of that. That's something we discussed. We've had a couple of meetings, and so they know that that is the number they have to work with.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion on number 6?
Yeah, I do have one more question as far as the dollar amount, since we're talking about that full 9.8 and working within that. I do see in agenda item number 6, as far as the DA's portion of this, that the $3.5 million was indicated for at least that portion of the move. Can I assume that the remainder of the 9.8 will then go to the other portion of the move?
Right, to the fifth floor. That's
Right.
correct. That is the way that we are tracking it right now as well. And you know, I have had great conversations with Stacy and Keith, and they think that there may be a possibility to even bring some of the asbestos costs down. And if they're able to do so, that will even lower some of the amount needed for the projects. But definitely want to leave the cushion in there in case they're not able to bring those down a little bit currently.
And then lastly, item 6, being that PBA is a trust, we'll need to do an agreement, correct?
Yes, we'll want to add that to either the previous subrecipient agreement that's already in place, or we can create a new one.
Good catch. Gretchen?
So of that 9.8, 1.1 was previously allocated to the county assessor's office for its relocation of its fourth floor employees down to the third floor. Has that been scrapped or is that still set aside? That was part of the
Mhm.
because it's added to it and that was approved.
Can you hear Danielle? And she's
I
asking.
cannot.
I don't know how to work this thing. Can you hear better now? At that 9.8, 1.1 was previously allocated to the county assessor's office to move the fourth floor employees, which were assessor's employees, down to the third floor. So 1.1 was previously approved by P&G and allocated that way. That's inclusive in the 9.8.
That's correct. That's why we will need to revote today to restructure the projects. This would be a rollback of what is anything that has been previously approved for the fourth floor or any of the associated pieces that would have gone along with that. This is rolling back that and then moving forward with the new established plan.
All right, so you're revoking the assessor's fourth floor employee move and associated remodel?
Well, the portion of those dollars were used because there need to move the assessor based on the previous plan. And with the new plan, our understanding is that the assessor's office doesn't need to move, and therefore those funds wouldn't be needed for that.
Except that the assessor also established that it has social distancing issues on the fourth floor as well. And that justified the remodel and move down to the third floor.
Understood. If the board wanted to move forward with anything for the assessor's office, we would want to have that as a separate vote as well, since we are rolling back any and everything that has been occurred for the fourth floor so that we can move forward with the fifth and ICB. So any changes or additional departments or floors that are going to receive a remodel or funding of any sort will need a new vote at this time.
Well, but the agenda item never indicated that you were going to do that and retract on a prior plan to move the assessor. His fourth floor employees down to the third floor. So
That was always built into the fourth floor remodel as a project whole. It wasn't its own individual project. So in moving the fourth floor remodel dollars back, it is a
Danielle,
portion of that.
I'm sorry, I disagree with you.
Well, and it's my fault because I had said we were
The-
combining.
The assessor's fourth floor employees were absolutely forgotten about on the fourth floor remodel plan. And the assessor found out about it, and so we requested $1.1 million to reestablish that and to move the fourth floor assessor employees down to the third floor with its associated remodel, which was separately approved. It was never the initial approval. So it is a standalone and separate vote for the 1.1. It was originally
We
$8
have
million.
that built into the fourth floor.
No, you didn't, ma'am. It was an $8 million figure, and then it jumped up to 9 when it included the 1.1 for the assessor's office, and someone mushed the two numbers together and called it the fourth floor remodel. So you've just taken away the assessor's remodeling plans. And that's not in this agenda item. There's no notice to the assessor that you intended to do that.
So
That's
what-
because there's no individual project code for that. It was always coded with the fourth floor since it was the domino effect of the fourth floor discussion that was going on. So it never received its own project code. It was never submitted originally in the portal on its own. The reason that the assessor was able to even obtain dollars through the fourth floor remodel is because the court clerk's office had previously submitted that in the internal ARPA portal from the county. So that was built into that based on the domino effects that were occurring. But it was never tracked on our end as a individual project and still is not. And we are considering that as a portion of funds that went towards the fourth floor remodel due to the domino effect. And with the rollback, you're correct, those funds would be rolled out and the new projects will be approved moving forward. So if the assessor's office is to get a remodel, even at this time, it would need its own new approval. regardless of
Okay.
if it was
And
its
so
own
while I
project or
appreciate that point that you're making, Gretchen, I do think we probably do need to limit number 6 to number 6 and take that action and then do 7 separately. And what I'm hearing from Accenture, correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, is that we are breaking apart projects in a way that we had not before. That I'm hearing you say that that's critical even for a compliance standpoint. Tell me if that's incorrect. And
Yes.
preclusion of discussion of one doesn't preclude discussion of the other, but I would like to limit this agenda item to this and 7 to 7. My fault for blending the two because we did start to discuss both in regard to the memo that we had. from
Okay, so
Danielle
Donna, are you
earlier.
saying that you're willing to discuss this issue when you get to item number 7?
No, I'm saying right now I just want to sort of get number 6 done and then move to 7. But mainly I wanted to clarify that the break apart of the projects is going to be a critical aspect of compliance on a go forward basis.
Right,
That's correct.
but we're talking apples and oranges here. I don't care what her project code
Okay, I've got a
numbers are.
motion.
It's what the agenda item
So-
says.
Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and recognize Joe.
All right. Try to get this. I would move that we would recommend to the BOCC that 3.5 million of the previously approved 9.8 million for the project known as the fourth floor remodel be allocated to a separate project known as the DA-ICB, and that be contingent upon the written justification being provided, as well as a separate subrecipient agreement with the PDA in place between the two entities.
I second.
Get a motion in a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 So now we have $6.3 million that we're
We're
working
doing
with.
the math on that.
Okay.
6.3, you said?
If the 9.8 was right, yeah.
And so now we will move down to number 7, which is relocation of the court clerk's office from the 4th to the 5th floor. Danielle, do you have more to add on that?
No, it's what we're tracking in the memo that was shared that the court clerk would be moving to the 5th floor. This allows them to also use the Skybridge walkway over to the courthouse on the 5th floor, which is even better for social distancing purposes. It helps alleviate some of the traffic on the elevators that are already a little bit overburdened. And so this would allow people that are receiving services from the court clerk to then pop right over to the courthouse as needed as well. So that's just a little bit of additional background and why moving to the 5th floor now is the consideration.
Okay, man.
Yeah.
Danielle, to some of the questions that we heard on the fourth floor project,
Mhm.
it has $1.1 million that was allocated to use to create space, social distancing for the assessor's office. That's accurate, right?
Correct.
And that was on the fourth floor.
Yes. So my understanding is that the way that it was approved, the 1.1 million was to relocate the assessor staff to the 3rd floor because the 4th floor built out for the court clerk's office.
Okay, so, and that part of that project also to accommodate the assessor moving to the 3rd floor necessitated moving of the data room to the 1st floor. Is that correct?
That's correct. It would then have to move MIS to the 1st floor.
And is it your understanding that those two things, moving the 4th floor assessor employees to the 3rd floor and the data room to the 1st floor are no longer necessary?
Correct. In moving the court clerk to the 5th floor, these what we're considering kind of the domino pieces are no longer necessary, and the justification is stronger in just moving the one office.
Okay. But as a part of the project and the social distancing, we can still address the assessor's 4th floor space, correct? As it was
It
a
yeah,
part
it
of
would
the
need to
original.
be approved on its own now, but could be addressed. Yes.
Okay. So we're not cutting anybody out. We're just going to have to separate that into a 3rd project.
If that is the will of the board, yes.
I'm just going to point out, and I forgot, but Marcy reminded me, the Board of County Commissioners approved that 1.1 uniformly in March.
We're only a recommending
20th.
body, so,
Mhm.
No, but I'm just saying, the Board of County Commissioners approved
and the board
1.1.
can undo that as well.
I
And
understand, I'm just pointing that out.
Thank
Right.
you, yes. Okay. What action item what action do we need for agenda item number 7? Do I hear a motion?
well,
He's scribing as we speak.
yeah, I'm trying to, I think we want to take care of the people that we had intended to take care of in the most responsible manner. So what I'm hearing is we don't need to move MIS. Stacy, Keith, I'm looking at y'all. That's correct.
Not as part of the projects that's on your agenda.
Okay.
You can move them under their own project if you so desire, if you have extra funds.
Okay.
I do want to just caution as a general, we're giving this caution with any capital project. Currently in the consideration that's on the agenda, we have the 5th floor and the ICB. And after meeting with the infrastructure team, we do believe that the timeline on completing these is within reason. If we are to add some additional floors, specifically in the annex that would need to be remodeled, I'm not prepared at this time to make a recommendation either way on whether or not there would be a capability or a concern in the project timeline, because it is unlikely that you could do a 5th floor and a 3rd floor remodel at the same time. One will need to be completed in order for the other one to occur. And we are getting close to that being a potential problem. But again, that's completely up to the board, but I would need to have some additional conversations on the feasibility of that, because on the current agenda items that are being proposed, it is just the DA and the court clerk that are moving. We have not taken into consideration MIS or assessor any further.
How close are we coming, Stacy, to pushing past the ARPA deadline?
Really close. We need final votes from all boards this month. Reason being, we have an architect we've already procured for that original project. I have to renegotiate his contract now based on whatever you guys move forward. And then he's got to get started on his work to move the DA over. And then after the DA is gone, I can start asbestos, which is huge. And that is a pretty long process. So if we don't get started on that this month, in my opinion, and the owner's rep's opinion, we're going to be pushing that deadline. So, we're there.
Stacy, kind of a sequencing, and you just touched on it. So the first thing that's going to occur is basically emptying out ICB, demoing it, and getting it ready to move the DA.
Correct.
Okay, then the DA would slide in there. Then you would demo the 5th floor.
Correct.
Then we would build out, and the court clerk would go up.
Yeah, according to the agenda items
Okay.
you have today.
And then let's say the assessor's employees that are on 4. We would, if we
Well-
choose to address that, the board wants to continue to address that. We could move those employees out and into the vacated space on 4 in order to be able to.
Yeah, you'll have an
Address-
emptied out 4th floor at some
Correct.
point.
So we would have some swing space to move those assessors' employees while we did their social distancing project on the west end, I think it is. Is that right?
Or just give them additional space on 4. It's-
Either way.
There's a couple of options.
We're
Chad.
gonna have flex space to accommodate that.
Yeah, in the long term, yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. To the motion? Mr. Stein?
Good morning. The whole idea behind what we've discussed for 6, 8, 10 months was to be able to bring the assessor's employees together on one floor. So what are you telling me happens now? After it's been approved by the county commissioners to do that project. Now, tell me where we are. It seems to be ever shifting sands.
It does, that's a legitimate point, but what I'm hearing from Accenture is one of the critical aspects is that we need to separate these out and move forward separately with each project to ensure compliance long-term. And so I feel like that's what we're doing here. And as I said earlier, to me, this doesn't preclude addressing your concerns. It's simply moving forward on these others in a way that will allow us full compliance as we review next steps.
So the project is still lost in the shuffle? Or is there a fund available to do this remodel that was approved by the commissioners in a separate entity? Just trying to get a little guidance here because I'm confused.
Well, the commissioners can choose to.
The commissioners have. They've approved to do the project.
You're correct, they have. And I think we wouldn't be discussing this today if there wasn't some interest in making sure that our projects are in compliance with all of the ARPA regulations. I think what I had talked about, Mr. Assessor, was trying to ensure that your people are still taken care of. So the way I'm looking at it, we just are recommending moving 3.5 of 9.8 million to a separate project per Accenture's recommendation. That leaves us with 6.3. Gretchen pointed out that 1.1 was allocated for your office's needs. So I think we're trying to address the concerns that you've raised.
Is this a separate entity or is it folded in with somebody else's budget and then all of a sudden, oh gosh, we wish we had that money, but now we don't? Because I think that it's probably the point is somebody needs to do something to be able to allocate those funds directly to the assessor's remodel. And there has to be a plan that eventually either moves everybody to the third floor, which was the goal, because you're going to have a fourth floor remodel and my employees have to work somewhere. And if you're going to be doing asbestos removal on the fourth floor, that could be very cumbersome for our staff.
I don't know what you meant by, is this a separate entity?
I think that the issue is that there's $1.1 million allocated, but it's not under a particular cost center. It's not a particular item that is addressed. It merely gets folded in with other projects.
So the way that the fourth floor remodel has been approved and allocated fund-wise, it all goes into the capital account, and it is not at an individual level. There's not previously, until we've made this last approval, the funds, and the court clerk's office was very clear on this after several discussions that were originally going towards that remodel, were never necessarily under the court clerk's name, nor were these funds necessarily, or like their particular account, nor was the 1.1 moved into an assessor specific account. The way that the ARPA accounts are working, it's that they are moved on a project basis into accounts. And so this was a capital project. So all of the approvals have been bundled into the single capital project and moved into the capital improvements account. And in doing so, the way that the project has been moving, all of these pieces were necessary in order to, and all of the dollar amounts were necessary in order to make the initial fourth floor remodel that was presented and submitted. Obviously, there has been a lot of change and those pieces have changed. So the overarching dollar amount is the same in the capital account, but it was never line itemed per office because the reality was that each of these was necessary at that time. And with the new approvals, the understanding that we have is that moving the assessor's office, while may be very important and prudent, is not necessarily a necessity because of the ability to then move staff I understand wanting to be on the same floor, but by moving out the court clerk's office, there is additional flooring space on potentially those floors, and then prevents the domino effect of MIS included in the original remodel. Just something to be aware of. There wasn't a specific line item in that 9.8 that was allocated to MIS either, and so it's important to break these projects out now at this point that we understand what they're going to look like. But previously, it was just one singular project. And yes, dollar amounts were approved here and there to make it happen. But it is all in one specific capital account cost center, not individual offices.
Sure.
Hi, Danielle. Approximately 6 months ago, the assessor's office submitted an ARPA application for remodel of the third floor, which I believe was approved by you and your staff. It was about 3.5 million. And then the recommendation for that came to the board, and at the time, the board was the ones that decided not to pursue that. Is that correct?
I would need to go back and look at the minutes. I don't want to speak out of turn, but that does sound correct. And so at this time, there's not a specific assessor project, no.
Right. But my point is that you felt that in the review of that application, that it met the qualifications for the ARPA use, but it was the county's board that made the decision not to pursue that.
That may be correct, even though we approved it at that time, though, with the changes that are ongoing based on the other floors, we would need to do a reassessment and meet with the infrastructure team to determine the continued eligibility, just like we've done with the ICB and the fifth floor. We've had ongoing conversations as well to make sure that those have remained eligible, since a lot of pieces have changed.
Correct. All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pull us back again to agenda item number 7. This discussion is very specific to what is drafted here. I would say it doesn't preclude us or the BOCC from taking different action or adjacent, if you will, action on other items, but we do need to go ahead and take action if we are going to with item number 7.
I think we need clarification on the fourth floor project, right? And by that, I mean, a component of that project was the assessor's office. I think I've heard we need to break that up into a third project. You're right, Don, we don't have an agenda item to do that. Stacy, what I would like to have so that I can inform my boss as to my thinking and any recommendations that we might make or I might make that may or may not be voted for, is where exactly this is going to fall now. We're not doing MIS. We are doing MIS. We're not doing the assessor's employees to the third floor because the fourth floor is going to be vacant. Get us something that we can look at that would be the two different projects broken out and bring it back next week so we can talk about it.
Okay, we can do that for you. Off the top of my head, you're gonna have to find more funding though. I don't think it's gonna fit in the 9.8 anymore.
And then
Because
that
a
gets
lot
to
of money
the,
went
that
to
gets to the
ICB.
cautionary things that we've heard from Danielle about moving space just to move space probably isn't ARPA eligible, if I can summarize what I've heard.
I don't know about that, but we'll put numbers together for you for a MIS move and a assessor move for a new project you can consider.
Are you all comfortable with that? To maybe we have some clarity on which piece is going where?
Yeah. If we're going to move forward with something for the assessor's office, I think that's definitely the component that we need to start with.
And are you seeking that prior to taking any further action? Is that what you
Yes,
really prefer?
So as it stands, if the previous motion that we made to recommend the 3.5 million be broken out per Accenture's guidance for a separate project, we still have the $6.3 million available to address the other needs. So I think that would be beneficial to kind of have a plan of this is how the money would be allocated, how it would be spent, does it or does it not meet with the guidance?
That's good, and that's consistent with something we discussed several weeks ago, just with regard to having a written plan with all the moving parts simultaneously that everyone can see.
So I move we would receive the discussion or the updates on item 7.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's go back to, I think we've completed everything but number 3. Grant, I think we all have a document disseminated, if you'd like to come up and walk us through.
Hey, Dawn,
Yes, sir.
could I just suggest we just go paragraph by paragraph and line by line within those if necessary on the document that Grant gave us. So paragraphs 1 and 2, purpose and scope. I think, I don't know if you want to approve them section by section, how you want to do it, but
Well, we've received this report, this document has been put into this. We've moved this document several weeks ago, as I recall, and then what I was hearing you say, Grant, is that this document isn't final ready as far as if we were to approve each paragraph. You're not treating this as a
Right, yeah,
Please
no,
approve
no,
and
not
move
at all.
forward.
This
Okay.
was everybody's suggestions they gave to me and asked to put on one document to look. And you will see a lot of points in there that may be duplicated. That's because it's the combination of
right.
multiple people
Mm-hmm.
putting in input, maybe slightly some different verbiage.
so what I would suggest is we take this as a working document.
Mhm.
We make our final edits, if you will. We ask Grant to get that up to the DA for a last review before coming back to us as a recommendation to the board.
That's great, that
Perfect.
works
Okay.
for me.
All right, so for 1 and 2, um, 1 and 2, I would recommend that we would just leave those as they are in the document presented by Grant. And the one change there, it's really just a duplication of what's contained in the scope below.
No objection from me.
Good with those? All right.
Grant, we're on number 3, just for purposes of everyone hearing and us having a sort of a cohesive discussion. Would you mind just walking us through the document you put together?
Sure. On number 3, what you see in the green is the suggestion from the district attorney's office. Highlighted was added that this board requested some additional clarification from the district attorney's office, meaning what's highlighted, what that specifically means.
As far as support for public events, collaborative efforts with nonprofit organizations.
Correct.
Okay, so you're needing clarification for those two specific.
Right. This board requested further clarification on what that specifically means.
I did.
Or would
Yeah,
entail.
so I asked
Okay.
for that several weeks ago. And the discussion, as I understood it, was number 1, we sort of had then we were supplemented with a list of example activities. And number 2, it's my recollection that part of the answer from the DA's office was that this was language that was used elsewhere, and I don't recall what that was, but that when they helped put this together, they had drawn this language from elsewhere, and I don't recall what the source was.
I don't either.
Okay. And part of my question was that these are broad phrases, support for public events. I was asking, what exactly does that mean? Collaborative efforts with nonprofit organizations. Uh, and I think, Joe, you had you hop in here, you and I both happened to notice that those were sort of broad and
Very broad.
And so I was just seeking clarification. I think the examples were helpful for me, but if anyone else would like to speak to those, I think we have other knowledgeable parties.
I'm sorry, Renee Troxel, as you guys all know, but for everybody else out there. So my question, when you're asking about these being broad terms, support for public events, collaborative efforts, it would seem to me that with all the things that Shine does, that they necessarily should be broad. And I'm a little bit confused about why we're trying to so narrowly define it, such that some of the projects may inadvertently be left out by such a narrow definition. And that's just my thoughts on the matter as you guys are discussing it.
I think maybe as the newest person in the room to the program, I was asking simply because I needed things like the examples. Those are very broad phrases. And so not by any desire did I have to narrow or to in any way create some type of inclusive only list, but rather I was just trying to understand what our goal is there. It doesn't even necessarily need to be in the policies and procedures.
Okay,
but
fair.
As a body, we're going to review those things. Those questions jumped out at me immediately.
Okay, and that's fair. Then you have the list now, so you're not going to try then to incorporate that list into the policies and procedures. That just helps you understand why those terms were used. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think I have an idea.
Perfect.
Yeah. So as to not try to itemize this document and perhaps leave that language the same, let me throw this suggestion out there. I think it would be beneficial for both the county and for these nonprofits that we're providing the assistance to enter into an agreement that would specify the terms of the services that will be provided.
And that's a separate issue than this.
Well, it's not a separate issue. It prevents us from having to try to itemize out this document. It provides some flexibility to the county in terms of the services they may provide, and it provides some protection to the BOCC and those entities.
Mr. Ravitz, did you have something you wanted to offer?
If the tornado hit tomorrow and the Red Cross needed people from Shine or whatever, and Shine has been involved in tornadoes and floods and things like that, there are so many nonprofits that we don't know. I mean, if you put a catch-all, what I would do is use the term assist nonprofit organizations. I would not have a list. I would have a list in the sense that the director could have a list of organizations he's worked with in the past and put down something that gives the director the flexibility to utilize some other nonprofit at a later time especially on an emergency basis. To sit there and to guess, I mean, there's nonprofits that Shine probably are going to work with every 2 or 3 years, and that's it, just once. And to sit there and to guess on every one of them, to have some type of memorandum of understanding, I think goes way further than what you need. I mean, we've gotten by with community service organizations without contracts in the community service section since 1986 when we had community service. So I don't know why Shine should be any different in that particular sense. So as it relates to that, that's would be my position.
Perhaps we need to address the community service aspect of that as well then.
And maybe, I mean,
but
I think
Bob,
it's utterly ridiculous to have a list every time you do something that requires memorandum of understanding. I mean, for nonprofits, it isn't going to work, and it just makes it more and more of a bureaucratic entity, and there's no need for it. I mean, what's the need for having a contract with the Homeless Alliance that says that Shine will assist the Homeless Alliance when necessary.
It defines what that assistance is, Bob. I think that, I don't want to speak for Don, but it seems to be that we have similar concerns.
I don't need a list, and this MOU is something new that I would want to think about. But that language jumped out to me as I did not know what it meant. The examples have helped me further understand sort of what that looks like in reality.
And I agree with you. I think that's why that we ought to use the term assist, and you ought to have a list available. That anybody can come in and say, hey, what organizations are you currently assisting? What volunteer or nonprofit are you currently assisting? He'll know about it. Then if somebody else wants to sit there and call him, he can add that to the list. You don't need MOUs of exactly what they're going to do. You don't know what they're going to do. That's just my suggestion.
And that might be the problem.
What?
We don't know what they're going to do.
Well, hopefully your director will know what they're going to do, or you'll get a director that knows what they're going to do.
Oh, I think he knows very well what to do, and he's done a really good job in this transition. So that, I don't
know how your director's done it with community service for 30 years without MOUs. I don't know why you would need to change that.
It was an idea, Bob.
What?
It was an idea.
Yeah, and I'm just suggesting
Yep.
a different one. So that's my concern as it relates to that. I do have a couple other concerns. They're minor. Well, there's one major and a couple other minor. I don't know if you're going to discuss that today or not.
Is it within the body of this document?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so on 3.
Well,
The fourth, are you,
there's this.
is yours on paragraph 3, Bob?
Yeah.
Okay.
On page 3 of your document, and this is just, it says that.
Well, I think they're just gonna take paragraph 3 right now, and then when they get to the paragraph on page 3 where it's at, then, because they wanna confirm each paragraph.
So I do have a question, and it is related to item number 3, background. The specific comments, support for public events, assistance with nonprofit organizations. And just because I don't know, and just for clarification purposes, what are the overall concerns with those 2 specific statements? And is it just not having a working background of typically what Shine has done in the past? Or is there some other concern that is other than that?
I think, and Dawn worked in the AG's office, she might be able to help me out. But when you read certain AG's opinions, governments can't do things for private entities. We can't expend funds on the behalf of private entities. There are some exceptions to the broader general public purpose. And I think what I'm trying to do here is to make sure that what we're doing is to that legal broader public purpose. So that's my concerns. And
would it be
having an MOU or some other document that outlines the types of services we're going to perform, I think meets that criteria.
Without pigeonholing any opportunities that Shine might have to help with certain nonprofits or public events, would it be fair to say if we just included in this verbiage support for public events, excluding monetary support?
So that's an interesting question. That's not a bad question. Ironically, it's my tax background that made these phrases jump out at me as being a little bit too broad. That said, as I said earlier, learning they came from the district attorney's office and that was pulled from another source, I don't recall what that was, gives me a lot of comfort. And if they are comfortable with this language as our policy, I don't object to it. When I raised this question, it was really almost on first blush of let's just confirm what we mean by that. But I think that your point is well taken, and
That portion, I'm sorry, the support for Dennis Collaborative is not on the board. That did not come from this.
Where did that come from?
That came from.
Oh.
Okay.
In the green, and because it was inside that body, so I put it in there so it blended in with the rest of the policy, but I want to clarify what specifically came from.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, that is helpful. That doesn't change sort of my position, though, with regard to confirming that your office is comfortable with this language. I don't have a significant discomfort with it. Right, thank you for that input. And I think we've agreed you all will review it later.
Right, right.
Great.
Judge Mai?
I'm comfortable leaving it the way it is, since they're gonna get a shot at it, and there seems to be some, and they are aware, they're sitting here, they're aware that at least an MOU may be beneficial, whether or not it's necessary, they can weigh in on that. I do have one suggested change, though. It's on the third and the fourth line. It's currently reads, the program consists of performing physical labor and beautification projects. I would suggest we change that. Program consists of performing physical labor and beautification projects on publicly owned property.
All right, so why don't you all look at the language in 57 OS section 222, which defines the use of inmate labor for may be used on private property for public purpose. And section B will define what public purpose is, and it is generally generalized for that very specific purpose because it is defined there as being appropriate for that purpose. So why don't you go ahead and just look at that language and then shape your policies based on that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, Judge Mai, where did you pull that information from, just so we can?
57 OS 222 sections A and B.
Perfect. Thank you.
Joe, could you restate? You had just made it actual.
On publicly owned property.
Yeah, following the word projects, inserting on publicly owned property.
It specifically addresses the use of inmate labor on private property for a public purpose. And I can submit this to you if you wish.
What you're saying is you wouldn't need it to be clarified.
It is already on, well, it is, public purpose is already defined in 57 OS 222, which specifically addresses the use of inmate labor on private property for a public purpose.
For a public purpose.
Correct.
Judge, thank you. Lisa, as you're looking at this, I assume you're going to get it since you're here. That statute that the judge references is the Prisoner Public Works Act. Generally, I think dealing with DOC. So if you would look and make sure, and if that's the case, then I think that's a great suggestion to incorporate it, or even if we could just borrow the language.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. I want to go ahead and make a motion to receive this document.
Which document? What document?
This document here that was presented that just kind of outlines what Judge Mai was talking about.
This is the statute that Judge Mai was referring to. It's a copy of Title 57, Section 222.
I don't know if we have, we can always, yes, I'll second receipt of, Title 47, Section 222.
Aye.
Okay, does anyone else have anything else on background number 3 of page 1?
I do. I was just going to refer to, on the physical requirements, if on page 5, worksite policy, there's several things that already address this. These were taken from the original documents. The outdoor, the activities, the bending, the brush removal, the type of dress, and everything is already addressed. And I don't know, is anyone
it-
besides Brian or I Brandy, you probably worked on a,
Is that the work site policy?
yes,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
which was taken from the original
Mm-hmm.
policies and procedures, I think been in effect for 13 years now. But the ability to stand for long periods of time or walk distances up to a mile, I don't, Brian and I, has anyone else in the room operated, led a shine crew? We don't stand for long periods of time, and we never walk for miles at a time.
Mhm.
The frequent, and we don't lift 25 pounds. The frequent bending, stooping, reaching, prolonged exposure, those items that are underlined are already all repeated in the document later. And then we don't use any, we use hand tools, but we don't use any machinery, heavy equipment. I don't think we even have a ladder on the truck, do we? Yeah, so those are just, those things I just think are irrelevant. I would,
So are you suggesting to just omit machinery, heavy equipment, and climbing ladders?
I would omit physical requirements down there to the bottom, to the rest of that that's in green, because it's already addressed in the worksite policy. Or to me, it's irrelevant because we don't operate mechanical machinery. We don't even have a ladder on the truck. I mean, we handle trash bags probably 80% of the time is what we're doing. And we don't turn anyone away. We always say at the very beginning, everyone's getting equal credit, so we expect equal effort. And we get, mental health, drug court, they all refer to us. And actually having someone that will hold a bag open so someone else can put trash in it is very critical, to be honest with you. So we really do accommodation. We always have. Anyway, so I don't think anything after beginning with physical requirements is needed. It's either address it else place it in the document, or it's not relevant to the task that we do.
So it's redundant to have the physical requirements listed in this 3 background section.
Yeah, and I to put a standard of having to be able to walk for a mile or lift 25 pounds or stand for long periods of time precludes a bunch of great people that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
Actually kind of disrespectful to them that we've had come out and really serve on our crews.
Who put these recommendations in here?
The DA.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, Charles, there are some things that are duplications within.
Mainly in those top
But
2 or 3 or maybe even 4 on worksite policy.
one of the things that's also in here is if you're unable to meet those physical requirements that the DA has suggested being in this policy, you notify the Shine supervisor and you are assigned to light duty. So we're accommodating those individuals as the policy is currently written.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they're already in here, so I don't know why we would be redundant and do them again. I mean, they're already part of worksite policy. That would be my recommendation.
I agree with Charles because in this paragraph, or this sentence where it starts with physical requirements and go down, I don't see there where it gives the qualification that you can notify the supervisor and you can be assigned light duty.
It's
So-
listed elsewhere in the document.
Well,
Renee.
I understand, but you're saying the point is, and the point that Charles making is about moving this, is that all of this is fleshed out further in the document.
Mm-hmm.
By putting this right here up front and not having that qualifier, it makes it appear that people who cannot do these things may not be allowed in the program. So I think you take, if it's already there, take that one paragraph out so everybody's clear and that it has it all fleshed out later on.
So just omit that portion in this section because it is addressed later.
Correct.
All right. I have a point of clarification to make. I believe that you stated that you received 47 OS 222. It should be 57 OS 222.
I thought I said 57, you're correct. No,
All right.
My bad, I may have misread. Thank you. Okay, I think we are still on 3. Are we done with background?
Is there any objections with just omitting the physical requirements aspect of that section?
Where is it listed?
I believe it was under work site policy on page 5, where it goes into details about attire.
So that language, while similar, is not identical.
Well, perhaps we can omit it in this section and then address it when we get to the work site policy and add any other pertinent details as needed in that section.
Their community service counselor and provide medical documentation. That's under bullet point 2 under worksite policy. Is that what you're referring to, Joe, or?
Yes.
Yeah. So
that is our accommodation to someone who may have a physical limitation to the criteria listed.
Yeah, and so that's under bullet point 2 there. When it talks about the pulling, pushing, bending, lifting. Well, I mean, again, working, and Brian could back me up on this, probably Randy too. I mean, you're all just out there working there together, and you're going to a different site, and you have different, challenges at each site that you go to. So when you get there, you just assign. Someone says, "Well, it's actually kind of like going on a camping trip, and this person puts up the tent, that person starts a campfire, and then you're at a whole new campsite." So everyone just kind of falls into what makes sense for them to do. And in the morning, you've pretty much gotten to know the crew really well, so you know what they're going to be good at and not good at, and then knock out the rest of the day. By the end of the day, you got this great crew, but it's never the same crew the next day. It's always the different people showing up.
So my only concern, again, I was referencing a part of the green earlier that I thought was sourced to the district attorney's office. It was not, Grant, you clarified, though the rest of the green is, and that's part of what we're talking about changing, correct? So I don't have an objection if we think it's redundant and stated elsewhere. I would certainly want to know council's thoughts on why they added those before we just decide that they are unnecessary, or that would be my preference before eliminating them.
However, this is a suggestion, new policy, changing the recommendation that you want to make to the green. We are perfectly fine with.
Right, thank you for that. That's exactly right. I would be comfortable if we need to, certainly, if it's redundant, move it, again, subject to final council review.
And just in their defense too, and it came out in a meeting prior, the DA's department did not have this worksite policy that was already incorporated. And probably, I went there 13 years ago, but probably refined a bit as we were out there and learned it too, so it's, been learned by trial. But y'all didn't have a copy of this whenever you wrote all this other stuff, Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner?
I would add too that in visiting with Lisa afterwards, and just fleshing out what the scope of work was, we understood it was different of what's generally asked of Shine. And so the recommendations from something that was DOC that might be out there mowing, using high powered equipment items and stuff like that, just simply isn't applicable here. So the requirements wouldn't be required because it's not what we do.
Well, would you all be at least comfortable with the physical requirements aspect of this section? Just be omitted from this section, and then we can readdress it to include in the worksite policy portion, just so it's consistent and all of the like information is together in one section.
I'm sorry, but just one more note. If you look on page 5, the part that's in red there, that's what I did. I took anything that was not addressed but had been added by the DA in that number under background number
Okay.
3.
So you did incorporate portions of
Yeah,
that.
so
I
so
see
you
that.
see the horseplay at the bottom, and I probably adjusted that, and then the work performed
As part.
include sharp objects, hazardous waste, chemicals, and even
Right.
those were nuances that really resonated with me and were not already addressed here. So I've kind of done that on my own.
Okay.
That's what the red is there.
Just real quick to add, as far as those points that we're discussing, the physical requirements, and then the worksite policy that's listed later. That worksite policy that's listed later in this was pretty much just taken from our worksite safety rules. And so the worksite safety rules, which every single person that comes in gets that, they read it, they sign it, they date it.
Good.
And so the stuff on the end that's been discussed is simply just, for the most part, copy and pasted from the worksite safety rules. And so if we want to change, the specifics about pounds and whatnot, then I would suggest this would have to be changed as well. If we're not, then it can stay as is.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Is there a reason that physical requirements to roadways can't be removed since it's addressed further in the document?
Renee, did you want to hop up to the mic if you had something to add?
No, I was just trying to understand what Grant was saying, that all these things, because we don't do them, I was asking Grant, since he's the one that's gonna be working with this and the one that put this in here, if there's a reason, since all this is addressed elsewhere, why we don't just remove that part from your perspective?
That's not these specifics.
Yeah, these two paragraphs, there's,
This in the green right there, that came from the district attorney's suggestion. They're not listed anywhere else in the document, and they're not listed on the worksite safety.
because you don't do them, right? You don't do these things, machinery, heavy equipment, right?
There could come a time and a place where we do, but as it says right now, for the most part,
On one hand, we don't want to.
Okay, do either of you have a?
Well, I think we can at least start with the item that Charles mentioned is in the worksite policy. The work performed as part of the program may include potential exposure to sharp objects. I suggest omitting it under background because it is literally verbatim the same thing.
I'm sorry, but we're just drilling down so far.
Yeah.
The crew chiefs do sign off on being able to do that, but not the participants. We don't need participants that can walk a mile, stand all day long, operate heavy machinery, not pertinent to the.
Thank you for that clarification. Again, I have no objection to moving redundant language to a different section. I'd want to, and also note, Grant, again, I don't want to delay this, but as we are making some tweaks, I'm going to count on you to circulate a proposed final. Joe, did you have further comment on 3?
So beginning with the program, that language in the third sentence, third line, the new sentence, the program consists, we're removing from there down to roadways and placing that in paragraph or section, the worksite policy on page 5 as a separate bullet point. Is that my understanding?
That's my understanding of your suggestion, Randy.
Starting at, well, I had initially said just the very last sentence. In addition, work performed as part of the program may include potential exposure. That item is verbatim in worksite policy. So I feel like as far as that sentence is concerned, we can omit it in this section altogether. Then you have the second issue of starting with physical requirements of the program include the following, all the way down to 6 climbing ladders. I feel like part of that can be omitted altogether, and I feel like part of it can be moved over to the worksite policy. So perhaps we can, at least right now, in efforts to keep moving forward, we can omit it from this portion. We can stick it on worksite policy, and when we get to page 5, we can discuss the details of what we would keep and what we would omit altogether.
Of those 5 items, 3 and 4 are in the worksite policy. 1, 2, and 5 have no and 6 have no reference at all to the Shine. We don't even own a ladder. We don't lift 25 pounds. We don't walk
So
a
they're
mile.
unnecessary but not harmful as they're irrelevant, is your point.
Well, if it's physical requirements include, I think
We
it's
don't want
putting the
to
bar
eliminate
really
anybody
high.
that might not,
I don't
you know,
think
be
mental health
comfortable
board will use
or
this. Yeah.
able to use heavy equipment or a ladder, because
And
in fact that they don't
there's
they
an
don't use
exception
it.
provided for that. In one hand, earlier we heard if you want to move, Brandy, you were saying the sentence that begins with "in addition" there at the bottom. That's verbatim. That's what you said, correct?
It is.
You want to okay, so you want to delete that
Just delete it from background
from "in addition"
to roadways.
to roadways. Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
You gonna second?
Second.
All right.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's in the work site. Now, in the third line, the sentence that begins, "The program consists," running down through "or 6 ladders," my motion would be to move that into the work site section on page 5.
I will second that if at that time we get to worksite policy, we revisit the details and have the ability to tweak as necessary as we decide when we get to that section.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Rabbit?
On page 3, there's a restriction that it looked like the DA put in, but it doesn't encompass only persons who have been ordered by a state or municipal court to complete a program of community service as a condition of the sentence or probationary period imposed or eligible to participate in the SHINE program. There is such a thing called the district attorney deferred sentence in the statutes, we have a misdemeanor diversion program now that does not require a plea of guilty or a probationary period, and that should be added into that. That statute should be added so those people can participate in the program if the district attorney so recommends it.
Thank you for that input. That's helpful. Can you help incorporate that? Thank you. Okay, going back to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're on section 4 definitions.
Okay.
Grant, do you want to continue to guide us through?
Okay.
Okay, Grant, if you'll continue to guide us through your
Nothing on
document.
4, nothing on 5, 6. All I did was swapped out the very recent presiding judge's administrative order on participants who would qualify for SHINE. What I crossed out was old, and I think it just, for whatever reason, didn't get swapped out.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, that's it.
And the source is helpful to me, thank you. Okay, so I'll let you continue to walk us through your document.
Okay, so that was it. And then looking down on page 3, the green, as mentioned before, that was from the suggestion from the district attorney's office under that section 6. So I added all of them to that. And Mr. Ravitz, I will get with you again on what you just suggested for the misdemeanor court. Some more details so I can.
I see that a portion of this, the last bullet point that says at all times participants will conduct themselves in a safe, professional, and respectful manner. I do see that that is listed in red in worksite policy. So perhaps we can omit it in this section for redundancy. Okay.
Yeah, and then about mid-page, which I think is highlighted on your copy, about providing written materials and OSHA training on lawn equipment, power tools, and things that we just don't use. I would just recommend deleting that one altogether.
Well, does it do harm?
So just to add in that one section, we already provide, which is in there, we do the worksite safety rules as well as the community service guidelines. Each participant is given that to read, sign, and date. So we already do that. It would be up to you, but I don't know about providing each participant with what we're doing right now, the SHINE policy and procedure, to give them a copy of that as well. If you didn't want to, we can scratch that, and obviously put in the guidelines and the worksite safety rules. Oh yeah. And that is pretty much documented on the next page in red. And so if you'd like, I can scratch both of those and write something amenable to both.
Okay.
If that's okay.
That works.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so are we able to move on to page 4 and employees? Renee?
It's a tag team event today, obviously. I just have a question as to why we don't think pregnant people can pick up trash. It says participants who are or may be pregnant will not be allowed to participate in the program. I mean, obviously, we don't want them climbing a
I
ladder.
think we heard, Renee, that came directly from DOC's Prisoner Public Works guidance.
Okay.
I think the DA can review that.
Okay, well, I would ask then that you strike that and submit it back to them with that sentence stricken that says participants who are or may be pregnant will not be allowed to participate in the program.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's fair. And I say that only because you also have in work site policy, you know, as far as listing out light duty if somebody were required to need that. It just absolutely would not omit the person that is pregnant from being able to participate in the program altogether. But you still have a statement in here that if they were, for whatever reason, for whatever condition, they needed light duty, that would be available.
And I think by leaving this in here too, if a judge has sentenced someone to this program, the person is not expecting at the time, but is expecting before they finish the program, they would qualify under that light duty. So I would just ask that you strike that sentence and submit it back without that sentence in there.
I'm comfortable with that.
Go ahead, Grant.
And so the third green bullet point, as discussed, the majority of what the participant do is a trash bag and picking up. However, did you want to leave that section in there in the event there comes a time and a day where we do a lot of power tools, etc., or would you like me to omit that, especially?
Well,
regarding
just
OSHA?
considering the history of the program, and just correct me if I'm wrong, there has never been a point in time where any participant has been required to use a power tool. Am I wrong?
From my time, power tools, no.
So I think, I mean, historically speaking, I think it would be safe to omit that.
But what's the, again, it seems like protective language.
Right,
to
that's
me.
why I asked.
And I mean, is there a downside to having it? Again, it seems to me just a good protection. That
Right, yeah, I agree, and
that's our
that's,
stated policy, but I don't have a huge strong feeling.
right, yeah, and that could be more than likely why it's in there.
It would seem that having that language would allow you to utilize this program to the maximum, right?
Mhm.
And then we wouldn't have to come back and have to deal with this again and come through this group or whoever might be sitting here in the future, and then the board and then another board. So having it there,
Doesn't do
while
any
it's
harm.
not being done currently, doesn't mean you have to do it, but should that come to fruition and we're able to expand this program and use it,
Then we're covered.
you're covered.
Yeah, and I prefer
Well,
not
and
to go through all this again.
I can absolutely respect that. So perhaps maybe we can just word it a little differently, because the way I read it as it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if as I'm reading it, I get the impression that everybody gets this instruction for these, hand tools and whatever, OSHA or whatever. When really, I wouldn't want to make us required to do that for everybody. Maybe if we add in the word as applicable.
I'm not going to argue with you, but if you read that, it's pretty clear that the only time you're getting that training is if you're using that equipment.
Well, if that's
There we're
clear, then that's sufficient. I just want to make sure that that doesn't pigeonhole us to where we have to provide a certain kind of training that people aren't essentially going to have to use. That's my only issue with that.
Kind of in that same vein, I was just thinking, we've already looked at the existing policy that says the participant is enabled to engage in these service in these types of activities due to physical or medical limitation. They must notify. I think, the visually and the hearing and the medical impaired, which I am all of the above, as well as the age. We already accommodate all that. I don't know that it's beneficial to specifically push that up there. Anyway, to me, it's that bullet point is already addressed.
Wait, where are you?
The one that ends with the pregnancy, which I'm not touching that one, but
The participants who report hearings, page 3, about the middle of page 3.
To me, it's already in the second bullet point under worksite policy.
Oh, okay.
Talks about all pulling, pushing, bending, lifting are necessary to complete the task. If a participant is unable to engage in these due to physical or medical limitation, they must notify their, and provide medical documentation. To me, that is already covered. Under the second bullet point under worksite policy.
Well, and again, if as the DA does a comprehensive review, they see that that's redundant and want to eliminate it, that's great with me. I'm reticent to eliminate much of their language or any of it that I think might be protective of us or the program long term.
Yeah, and maybe at least if you are going to keep it in there, put it under worksite policy.
And I have no objection to moving.
Okay, so just to be clear, the bullet point that discusses participants who report hearing or vision impairment, we will move that item to worksite policy with the exception of the last sentence that addresses participants who may be pregnant.
Upon review.
So with that,
I don't have a problem with that.
okay, and we'll discuss that when we get there, but whatever we add to or change to this policy under worksite policy, then I would change our worksite guidelines that we pass out, assumably, so it matches.
Sure.
Because currently that's not on there, what we just discussed, so I would move to add that.
What are we doing with that language again, just so I'm clear? The language participants who report hearing or vision.
That
bullet
will be
point,
moved to worksite, the worksite policy section, and then that will allow, when it does get sent to the district.
You're talking and he's talking. Hold on. What did you say, Charles? I can't hear either.
To address what the phrase you're talking about, move it to the second bullet point at the very end so that you've got it all there together. And then if we want to condense it beyond that, we'll be able to, where it talks about physical and medical limitations, put it at that bullet point.
So it's, all the information's
So
there
it's all right
together,
there. If we
right?
want to
It's
address it
more
or the
cohesive.
DA wants to. That way, when you all get the document, you can go, you know what, let's condense this.
Just so long as that language regarding an light duty assignment remains, I'm fine with however you want to
I
address it.
wouldn't change any of the wording.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I have another question then, since we're moving it to
Renee.
that section. So where it says, notify their community service counselor and provide medical documentation. Are we really, I mean, if they tell us they can't do something, are we really gonna make them go get a doctor's note, or are we gonna trust their word? I mean, do you really get doctor's notes from folks that say they can't do it, or? Okay, and if they don't bring it in, do you still let them do the light duty, or do you require them to go back and get a note from the? And it doesn't require medical documentation, right? So I would suggest that perhaps you take that medical documentation out. Because if somebody says they can't do it, you're already accommodating them, right?
So we have, in the event there's someone ordered to shine, and it says specifically in the order by the judge to do shine, and they come in and say, well, I can't do it for X, Y, and Z, or bring medical documentation, that still has to go back to the judge, because we can't just send them somewhere else because it's specifically ordered. So however we want to roll with that, I'm more than happy to.
Yeah.
And it's fine with me if we don't document in these policies every possible hybrid fact pattern
Right.
that you all
Mhm.
manage. I'm confident you are
Absolutely.
managing.
Right.
Okay.
Next one with the waiver of liability, that section, is on the worksite safety rules that we give to the participants and they sign, and it's on there. So we can certainly,
So it's redundant.
well, it's not redundant, it's not in the policy, but it's in a separate form that each person reads and signs.
Oh, I
When
see.
they sign up.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So-
redundant within your own documentation, just not this document,
Right.
is what you're saying.
Well, yes, it's not a specific, only a waiver, but it's part of the worksite safety rules, if that makes sense. So if you'd like, I can reword it in a way that says that, or omit it.
And
Either
it's-
way.
And, yes, that'd be great.
Which one? Reword? Or
No, I'm sorry.
omit?
I was just, what I was gonna ask is, frankly, as we receive back a final, hopefully close to final draft, I know it's a lot, but if you could incorporate at that time some of these documents that you're referring to, so we can see, for instance, this has been eliminated as it's redundant in document A, would be valuable, I think, for everyone at my office, council,
Absolutely.
et cetera. Thank you.
Right, and the next one regarding, let's see. Okay, refusing to sign the acknowledgement form, again, that's just gonna be a case-by-case basis. Again, if someone's specifically ordered to shine, we take the next steps, but,
Mhm.
Of course.
So do you think that that bullet point is necessary?
I believe it's somewhere else on here, but my mind's spinning anyway, so I'd have to relook at it.
Can I ask a quick general question? Maybe you,
Yeah.
Renee, one of the lawyers in the room. Are these people considered in custody or out of custody?
I would assume out of custody.
Thanks, Judge.
Generally, these are people on probation. And so generally, they're all out of custody. And it is very different from the DOC programs, which operates very heavy machinery and other equipment out on the roads. So yes, these are generally not, well, all of them will be out of custody.
Good, all is helpful.
Yes.
Here.
So I think we're good on page 3.
Okay.
Let's move along.
I did note under, on page 4, under employees, that the second bullet point, shine program by filing a notice of violation with the Oklahoma County Clerk. Should that be court clerk?
Court clerk.
Okay.
Right, yes, easily make that change.
Okay, so we are on, under employees, page 4. I have no further questions or concerns there, Joe.
Hold on, Renee's got something.
I do.
I do
Just
too.
one comment, because where we're talking about changing, filing a notice of violation with the Oklahoma County Court Clerk, it should be and a copy delivered to the judge. Just because it's filed with the court clerk doesn't mean the judge has notice of it.
Okay, so we just need to add,
Yeah, so a notice of the violation shall be filed with the Oklahoma County Court Clerk and a copy provided to the assigned judge. Copy of the
Provided-
notice of violation provided to the assigned judge. Yeah.
provided to the assigned judge. Perfect.
Right. So,
Sure.
yeah, because otherwise, like I say, if it goes in the court clerk's file, we don't know what got filed there. The judge
Mhm.
doesn't know unless the
Good
copy's
point.
actually delivered to them.
Good point. I also wanted to address the next bullet point that says the Director of Court Services will ensure that work crews will not exceed 1 employee for every 10 participants. So I know that there's been a little bit of conversation about 10 participants. I'm not sure of the origin of 10 participants, but I do know it's been kind of batted around that, well, it could be 12, it could be 15. Is this something that should remain fluid depending on needs, or is this something that we need to establish in this bullet point? Do we need it? Do we not need it? If we do need it, does it need to be 10?
And I think the discussion previously, because again, this was a suggestion that came from the district attorney's office, and I believe it was solely based on safety and liability.
Mhm.
But with that being said, there was also mention of tweaking whatever number it wants to
Right.
be, or taking away, changing, whatever.
Right, right.
Whatever you want to do. I'm happy to do either one.
Mhm.
But that's the origin, and that's how it got
Are you, if you say you're happy doing either one, are you comfortable with then just omitting this bullet point?
there. I'm fine doing I'm getting there. Whatever you guys want me to do, I'll do. That's what this whole thing is based on. If we do 1 for every 10, understand that,
You're going to be restricted.
well, I definitely don't want to get in a position where one day comes and, like I've mentioned before, we have 2 crew chiefs and the 21st person showed up.
Mm-hmm.
We can and we would send someone away. I'm just concerned if that person needs to get that 8 hours done
Absolutely.
right away.
Because they're on a deadline and
But
they've
then
got
with
to
that
get that
being said,
completed.
With 10 and it's for safety reasons, for liability reasons, then if we need to do that, we'll certainly do that. However, we're going to have to go back and look at our number of staff that we have, and we're going to have to add more staff. And then there could come a day where we have what I just mentioned, 3 crew chiefs and 6
Mhm.
people show up.
What's our, just for context, what is our standard practice, or what is the usual ratio?
So during the week, we typically have, it's the slowest time. It's anywhere from sometimes 4 to, upwards of the teens, 10, 11, 12 during the week. The weekends are the big weeks where sometimes there's low 20s, and of course sometimes there's few. It all depends. But the weekends are the busiest times, where there could be in the 20 some, and then during the week it's going to be the fewer.
Commissioner?
Well, one thing about it, the weekends are bigger because they're sentenced to weekend duty.
Mhm.
So they'd be in direct violation of a court order if we didn't allow their participation.
Mm-hmm.
Second is, we rarely start the day with who we end the day with. As
Right.
Commissioner Davidson could also attest to, who's here now, is that there's a constant rotation. So if even momentarily there should be a little overage, it's not likely that would exist more than beyond a couple of hours, especially beyond lunch. A lot of them only work half days and then take on another assignment, or they only had a few hours left to fulfill their court order anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So in understanding the fluidity of the situation, and then also the urgency and the need for availability for these community service workers to be able to perform their weekend duties as court ordered, I just recommend that we just omit this bullet point.
I would second that too. But I was gonna say, in Fancy Fence, though, he's down one staff person. He lost his weekender person to a medical. And so like when you have that person, which we always did, you could have 30. I don't know that we've ever had 30 show up. I never had during my watch, but you'd have 3 staff people then on Saturday and Sunday, which has been all the weekenders. So under normal conditions, it wouldn't even be an issue. And it's a goal that I think would remain even with it not being a bullet point. It's a good number. But once you got staff back up, that another weekender person, you could have up to 30 people, which I in history, I don't think we've ever had.
No.
Be a good problem to have. Staff up more.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on this? I don't have an objection to eliminating it.
Okay.
So go ahead. and
All of my, and of course, as I've said earlier, all of my positions will be subject to review by your office, especially with ones where we're discussing liability and your suggestion. But I don't have an objection. It doesn't sound like pattern and practice of the past creates a lot of exposure.
Operating of equipment, all those things that are policy anticipated for a liability.
Right.
For heavy work than what appears to be being done.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so as I'm putting this together, go ahead and omit that bullet point. Is that
Correct.
what I'm hearing?
I don't have objection to that with input from the DA.
Okay. The next one is just basically if there's some sort of emergency injury, to follow typical protocol 911. Wait for emergency responders and notify everybody.
Continue.
Good.
Yeah. Page 5.
And then here in the red, it's just in essence what we currently do. Employees shall provide daily the names and actual hours worked of each participant, which is what we do. And I think it's a little, this one and the next one somewhat duplicate up. And if you'd like, I can combine those and word it in something that, if you're okay with that.
Just to eliminate redundancy.
Correct.
Sure.
If you're okay with that. Okay.
Okay, but on a few points down, I'm down to the middle of the page, bullet about work gloves. Am I passing
Which
you?
page are you on?
I am on page 5.
Page 5. Okay.
Would you say about halfway down?
Yes.
Oh, service workers must bring a pair of properly fitting work gloves.
I didn't want to get there till I made sure we weren't jumping anything anyone else wanted to discuss. Are we good?
And again, on this the work site policy, in essence, it's taken from what we already have had in place for years, the work site safety rules. There's 16 points on that. And then I believe there's some additions on this, which is where this came from. So
I just had a question. I don't want to take everyone's time with it, but I feel like we've gone back and forth in here and discussing what workers bring or what we provide. And so, do we provide gloves? They must bring
yes.
gloves.
Yeah, we provide what you just mentioned, but we also, when they first come in, we tell them too, if you have additional PPE you would like to bring. However, we provide gloves, vests and all that. So we have that, masks.
So
they may bring gloves.
Yeah. So you tell them that they need to bring gloves, but if they show up the day of and they don't have gloves, then you, okay.
We have them all for them.
Okay.
Steel toe boots, whatever they want to bring, we
That had been my understanding, okay. Okay, and moving on. What else do we need to address on page 5? Grant, do you have anything?
No.
Very good. Let's move to page 6. Grant, do you want to kick us off with procedure in section 7?
Let's see. So in the green, that was again a suggestion from the district attorney's office. Let me get caught up here. Oh, so yeah, those 2 points together, green and red, are in essence the same thing in whatever verbiage you're comfortable with.
And the highlighted yellow?
That was again, this board requested additional
Clarification.
from the district attorney's office.
And I just want to say again, I said this a couple of weeks ago, I love this language. I think we all need to remember it, where we talk about not continuing ongoing contracts where funds are no longer, where funds have been exhausted.
Okay. So then you're suggesting.
I'm not suggesting a change. I just think we need to, I appreciate this language and I think we should use it elsewhere.
Okay, a couple of things. Go back to the first bullet point. Funding for Shine will come from the following sources. The Commissioner, the one directed funding source is the statutory assessment fee. Is that correct?
It's an option on there. It's also covered in here that it's not required in order to participate in the program. That it's a tool for the judges to use.
Right, but that is statutorily dedicated if they chose to impose that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I would suggest that we just modify that first bullet point a little bit. Funding for the Shine program will come from the following source, and then assessments provided in 19 OS with that same language. Additional funding may be provided from county general fund, grants, and/or through contracts with municipalities or other governmental entities.
That's good. I like that.
Okay. All right. And then down there in that fifth, I'm sorry, the green bullet pointed point language, where it says work performed pursuant to the contract with the state or municipality should be invoiced each month to the maximum amount of the contract. I would suggest we change that to read should be invoiced each month based upon the terms of the contract or contracts.
I don't disagree with that. I think it should be based on the term of each contract. However, there might be a situation in which the terms of the contract would be one lump sum annually. So I don't know if specifying each month would preclude those contracts that might be one lump sum annually.
Just take that, yeah.
Yeah.
Just delete those
Yes.
next two words.
So then it's just
Should be
based-
invoiced based upon the terms of the contract.
perfect.
Contracts.
Anything else there? Anyone?
Good.
Are we comfortable with moving down to equipment?
Oh,
Are you good?
yeah.
Okay, great. I am, and let's move to equipment, the bottom of page 6, Grant, please.
And yeah, like mentioned, we provide gloves, masks, that sort of stuff. Is it in accordance with OSHA? No. We provide what we've been asked to provide them with. We can certainly change that. Protective headgear we do not have for.
Hmm. Yeah, I was looking at that in particular, you know, the headgear, possibly even the safety goggles. I mean, has that ever been a necessary safety precaution?
You can get some if you think we should. Currently, we're not providing safety goggles to.
Right. Just for historic information, Charles, were you going to mention something? So it's redundant anyway.
I'm sorry, it is. Hard hats will be worn when there are overhead hazards. Those two are actually.
Okay.
And that's from the worksite safety rules that are signed.
Okay. So do we feel it's safe to just omit it from this section as it being redundant? Okay.
Yeah, I have no objection to streamlining.
So,
Okay.
I'm sorry, say that again, I was reading.
Just talking about, just clarifying that it is in fact redundant, this bullet point, and that it is okay to eliminate it from this section.
So that entire bullet point.
Right.
Next is that equipment purchase from highway cash.
Okay, so you've moved to 7 in the red.
Yeah, y'all might have pointed those out, but the last two bullets on 6 are also on 7. Before you get to scope of work, they appear to be the same. Maybe in red.
So as far as the county equipment purchase with funds from the highway cash fund and loan to Shine will be reimbursed, do we currently have that situation?
So we have moved forward to page 7 in the red.
Well, it was,
I'm seeing it.
well, there's also, it's the last bullet point on page 6. So it's listed twice,
Yeah, okay.
but it starts on page 6.
So for that one, don't believe we're borrowing any equipment.
Okay.
Anybody, anything that's of inventory that we use is on our.
If you use the reasoning for keeping our equipment and all this OSHA training, what if they do borrow it? If you then come back.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Charles, do you mind
Okay.
hopping up to the mic?
So Charles, just to clarify what you said, just in efforts to have this in place in case the scenario were to happen, that it's just good to go ahead and keep it in.
I think it's occurred in the past, right?
It has occurred in the past, but I just didn't think
Yeah,
that
so
it was
leaving it
occurring
in does it.
currently. Okay, perfect.
So the bottom green bullet point on 6 is what you're looking at, correct?
Yes, and so we've concurred that we'll leave that one alone. But it's also reiterated as the first red bullet point, is that right?
Just remove the duplicative language there.
Yes,
think-
agreed.
Perfect.
Okay. Fran, I'm letting you lead us through your document. Where do you think you want? Where are you thinking?
So,
I think I know
top of
where I need
7,
Okay.
Dumpsters.
Yes.
Mhm.
We've gotten that all figured out and
Perfect.
hashed out, and I think we're good on that. Let's see.
And this is redundant too, correct?
I believe the
Mhm.
last green bullet point and the last red one
The same.
are
Right. So eliminate.
complete duplicates.
Yes. But otherwise, when you say hashed out, the leaving just one of the two
So, yeah,
paragraphs.
yeah, sorry, it's, we have it, the process in place as
Great.
far as, yeah.
Okay, are we ready to move on to scope of work? Move on.
Getting there. Okay, so we're scope of work.
Yes,
Are we
sir.
all there? All right, we can start at the top if you want. This is, again, Greens from the district attorney's office.
So I think the first green bullet point and the first red bullet point are identical. Is that correct?
It looks identical. Mhm.
Okay, so Grant, if you'll just address that language. The third and the second.
So we're on the third bullet point now.
Well, the third green bullet point and the second red bullet point. There's some duplicative language.
Okay, is there anything else we need to discuss there?
I do, just to clarify, and I want to make sure I understand this, is that as far as private property is concerned, because private property is mentioned on here, as far as private property is concerned, in the event of an illegal dumping, we can go on private property. Do I understand that correctly, or I do not?
You can.
That's what I'm making sure.
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
In that packet that you have there, the email from the DA, Ms. Bahana,
Yes.
I have it too.
she says it very specifically in her email.
I have it. I have copies.
Can I borrow Charles for a second? Yeah.
And I bring this up because I want
I
to
think
be able to do what we.
I want to make sure I understood it. This email said you could go on private property to pick up trash. That the way I read the email, and perhaps I'm wrong because I'm just now glancing at it. It says trash on the right of way, essentially, and you're going to provide some clarification on that.
Situation in which public body can go on private property for big nuisances, that's a public health safety. So I will get you some information. I think that
Yeah, might take a look at that because I think that involves the city county health department and then making some recommendations to the board as far as what types of ordinances, if you will, to adopt. So as you're looking at all that, okay, yeah, sounds good.
And specifically, I want to make sure because if an Oklahoma County citizen calls and reports something like that has happened, that we're good. That's why I want to make sure is in there, so there's no question.
This says I want Shine participants to pick up the trash, which is located in the easement of the property as soon as possible. If we're talking about trash. Now, graffiti is different and it's covered by a statute. You've enumerated how that works in this document, so.
Right, yeah, I just want to make sure on that second paragraph.
Yeah, I wanted to draw attention to the second paragraph. Of course, you know, with this particular situation that Ms. Bahena was looking at, she was addressing that trash was in the easement. But in the second paragraph, it mentions if a citizen of Oklahoma County calls and needs to have trash picked up from their property that has been illegally dumped, or if a homeless encampment leaves trash on a property owned by a citizen of Oklahoma County or on county property, Shine participants will collect the trash.
And I'm hearing you say that you don't feel it's critical that this be itemized in the scope of work that are our adopted policies, but rather you all will clarify advice to Grant so that his team manages it in a way that you're comfortable.
I think that we can go back and address what we discussed with those lines that we're talking about, defining public policy in areas of private property. We'll take a look at that in the policy and not think of it for private ones. A lot of this is redundant. The ideas all sound conceptually very similar. I think we can help out with that. But I was suggesting to Grant, giving him some additional guidance on what constitutes a public nuisance. That doesn't have to be in the policy.
Mhm.
That's just training.
As long as he has the understanding of.
As long as he has an understanding of what that is, that's good. As long as the policy covers the basics in it. As far as that is, they are addressing certain different kinds of concepts. The goal here is to give you a policy that's broad enough that you can have your director make those determinations.
Yeah, it is my preference. I concur with your theory that that we don't need to itemize the details of your legal analysis for here in this document, but we appreciate that you'll be getting that to him and he'll be making sure that we all have received the same.
Right, right.
Yes.
And in the event that does occur, we do not need some sort of, like is written in here, some sort of request from the municipality to do so. If simply a Oklahoma County citizen calls and says, hey, this has occurred, we would not need something from the municipality to do so. We can do it.
I think what I'm hearing is they're gonna take all of these different authorities that you've been given and meld them into a single understandable policy. And let them look at that.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, okay.
Renee?
Can I ask a question that I think goes along with what you're saying, Grant? Because in the last sentence of that third bullet point, it says homeless encampment abatement on public property and right of ways must include a municipal nuisance declaration. That necessarily means that the municipality has gone to court, they've got a judgment. So I think that's probably the kind of language that needs to be tweaked and looked at.
Abating and picking up trash in a homeless encampment comes with its own series of constitutional issues regarding picking up people's personal property and
Sure.
trashing it. So like I said, I would caution everyone, whenever abating something like a homeless encampment, that you consult with legal before that happens, because that's what's happening with municipalities and with state governments that are having agencies that are having to deal with that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. That's the kind of back and forth we need to hear.
Nothing on policy and procedures, but before we leave, I just had a request from the state auditor to furniture they're going to discard. They want it moved, they had requested Shine to move it to a not-for-profit that provides furniture for homeless people that are moving into housing. Does everyone understand and will Grant, is that kosher for Shine to do? I mean, I understand it to be, but right, government entity, state auditor.
I'm not inclined necessarily for us to advise on a very specific fact by fact from this body, but certainly I welcome council's thoughts on it.
Yeah, so right now, we're not comfortable with Shine working with not-for-profits, is that right? Okay.
We don't actually have an operating policy in place right now. You're asking a specific question to be it. Request for services and let us know exactly who the parties are before I can respond.
Okay, if I ask it generally, a government entity and a not-for-profit, does Shine have authority to provide services to both of those entities? Okay, all right, thank you.
Judge?
All right. Again, we're at the third bullet point and the issue of homeless encampment abatement. I think based on the conversation that has been had this morning and by council, that the definition of homeless encampment abatement must be defined because that could include just shopping carts with stuff that's been abandoned on the roadside, or if you drive down Oklahoma City Boulevard, you can see just a ton of stuff just left there. Maybe that's not an encampment, but it certainly is stuff that homeless or perhaps some people have left there. And so, is that homeless encampment abatement or is that trash removal? And so, if the conversation evolves around the issue of constitutionality with regards to homeless encampment abatement, that needs to be narrowly defined, as well as the issues relating to what is appropriate and what constitutional rights are being affected, and how would that be, how would the services be available to the public to abate those certain situations, and under what conditions would be appropriate, would be something that the DA's office needs to give guidance on. So that definition is not just sitting out there without any details and without any direction for the people who are involved to use.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I will definitely be looking into getting some written guidance on that. I do have the ability to also access the abatement. Recently, ODOT did one working with the city of Norman for an abatement, and we can address all the case law and give guidance to this body in a separate legal memorandum other than the policy.
Not great. Thank you.
Grant? We're getting close, it looks like.
I believe we are page 8. Looks, there's nothing other than the addition there or a municipal nuisance declaration, so there's nothing else on
I didn't have anything on.
the document to
Anyone else
discuss.
have questions or concerns with the remainder?
Just the things that have already been addressed, the homeless encampment abatement versus basic trash pickup, as well as the municipal nuisance declaration.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So we are going to count on you to do a summary document, if you will, incorporating everyone's input and having that reviewed by council before we discuss again, although I don't want to hold us up. It's my understanding you all are proceeding just fine as we work through the details.
Right, right. And so just so I know, you want me to go ahead and put together a document now. One document that's not a final draft, but in essence, a rough draft, right?
I think that would be
one
helpful.
document with what we talked about today.
Do we agree?
Yes,
With
making
that-
all the adjustments that we discussed today, streamlining the redundant verbiage.
And then with that document, would you like me to bring it to you Tuesday? Or
I'd like
back
to
to
give
you
council
Tuesday?
opportunity to review
and
before
then-
we see it again, just so that we don't keep talking
Assuming I can
about
get it done by
everyone's input.
Tuesday, but first chance, once it's completed, bring it back to you here, look at it in its entirety, and then send it over to the district attorney's office? Or am I just,
She suggested sending it to the district attorney's office before we see
before
it
it comes
again.
back here?
I'm going to count on you to streamline it, and I
Okay,
think that's.
no, that's fine with me. I just want to make sure I was taking the correct route of what's next. Okay, so it goes to the DA's office next. Okay,
Thank you.
anything else? I'm here all day. No?
Who isn't? Okay, so that, do we need any other action on item 3?
Receive the discussion, I guess.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any citizen participation? None. Board comments? Joe?
None.
Brandy?
No, thank you.
None from District 3. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.